Hello good people, I am here to give you my album review of Dr. Dre's newest and latest album, Compton, a soundtrack by Dr. Dre. That's right, I said an album from Dr. Dre. We have not gotten music from Dr. Dre in 16 years. His last album was 2001, which came out in 1999. I was 7 years old in 1999. I'm 23. But it's not like he's been slouching around not doing anything. Dr. Dre has had probably the most prolific career in hip-hop history. We're talking about the guy that linked up with Eazy-E to create N.W.A, the hip-hop pioneers of gangster rap. We're talking about the guy who created a subgenre of hip-hop in G-Funk and delivered one of the greatest hip-hop albums of all time, The Chronic. Dr. Dre launched the career of Snoop Dogg, one of hip-hop's legends. And then he went on to be instrumental in the creation of Death Row, which ultimately failed, but Death Row had some of the greatest hip-hop artists in the game during its height. Fast forward to the time of his second album, 2001, and he delivered another almost classic album and launched the career of Eminem. The new millennium saw him sign artists such as 50 Cent and The Game, who would become some of hip-hop's mainstays over the past 10 to 15 years. And of course, we know about his latest involvement with Kendrick Lamar, who is probably undeniably the king of hip-hop right now. Not to mention that he's rich as hell. Like, he sold beats to Apple and he is almost a billionaire at this point. He's certainly going to be probably hip-hop's first billionaire, side and side with Diddy. You just gotta ask, does Dr. Dre have anything left to prove? Of course he doesn't. He's made his name in music. He made his name in the 90s. He could have stopped there and still have been a legend. But here we are, 16 years after his last album, and we get his third conclusive finale of an album, Compton. Now, Dre said he was inspired to do this album after visiting the set of Straight Outta Compton, which will be coming out next week. After years of build up to Detox, he pretty much scrapped the album and just said it was terrible and he wasn't gonna release it. That album exists no more. And you know what? I am not mad at that because I trust his instincts. I was never worried about this album and whether it was gonna be good. Dre would never put out something if he did not deem it classic material. And boy, the doctor did not fail us. This album is incredible. Even as one of the richest musicians in the world, this album is incredibly personal and definitely does not find itself in the vein of just being, you know, a really vain piece of work of him boasting and bragging about his riches and his success. The intro of the album introduces us to this concept. The first words are, Compton was the American dream. And then it starts to talk about how the city of Compton eventually became a drug-ridden, a gang-ridden, very violent place where murder, muggings, and gang activity happen. The second track, Talk About It, comes out full blast. Dr. Dre unleashes his lyrics, you know, that we obviously know he did not fully conceptualize himself, but he comes out with just this new, you know, approach to his flow, his style, and he just delivers some new lyrics from Dr. Dre that we have not heard in such a long time. And then it goes into Genocide with Kendrick Lamar and Marsha Ambrosius, and Kendrick Lamar just hits on all cylinders. Like, you could tell that this album and Dr. Dre were really influenced by Kendrick and To Pimp a Butterfly. I would venture to say that these were recorded practically at the same time. There's a lot of political awareness and references on this album. You know, we hear references to Mike Brown, we hear references to police brutality, we hear him talk about Eric Garner. In Deep Water, at the end you hear a skit of somebody saying that they can't breathe. It's certainly an allusion to the tragedy of Eric Garner. And with a movie like Straight Outta Compton coming out, where we know that there was police brutality during those times in the LA riots, and seeing that Dre recorded this potentially last year leading into this year during such a tumultuous time in the country, he's recognized that he needs to talk about this. And he certainly comes from an area where Compton is known for its violence and its murder and its gang activity and even the police brutality. He lets this all be known on this album. The 6-track Dark Side, Gone, is like a 2-track song. Like, it starts off talking about, you know, his growing up in Compton and the things that he was exposed to, and then it flips and it talks about where he's been since he was from that neighborhood. It's like that fine line he walks of, you know, recognizing that he's made it to superstardom, but always knowing where he came from. Compton overall just has some incredible features. We get prolific artists such as Kendrick Lamar, such as Ice Cube, such as Marsha Ambrosius, Eminem, Snoop Dogg. And trust me when I tell you, Snoop Dogg delivered his best verses in years on this album. Hands down, his best verses in years. Exhibit shows up, delivers a really nice verse. Cube delivers a really nice verse. The Game has his own track on the song where he switches up his flows like 3 or 4 times. It just goes to show that when you're working on a Dre album, everybody is on their A game. And that's what I felt like listening to this. Everybody was shooting for the stars. Everybody revisited those places of hunger and desire and passion and let it all pour out on this album. Even the newcomers on this album are just standout figures. We're talking about people like Anderson .Paak, King Mez, Justice, Asia Bryant, she's a newcomer, and John Connor, he was a standout on the album. He had a few tracks where he was just delivering some really visceral, visual lines and bars. And seriously, this album is just incredible. Like, I have listened to it already 2 to 3 times, and I can tell you that this is certainly up there as one of the best albums of 2015 so far. Off of my first instinct, it's not better than To Pimp a Butterfly, but again, with time, that could possibly change. Even with all of his success, it still seems as if he has something to prove. Dre is 50 years old, and he's just standing toe-to-toe with some of the best artists in the game. And like I said earlier, yes, we know other people ghostwrite for him. We've always known that about Dre. But the genius about Dre is not always his lyrics. It's his producing ability. It's his ability to turn them into legends and icons. It's his ability to listen to music and point out the distinctive differences that make something great versus the things that just make it good. Undeniably, he has an ear and an eye for talent. And with Compton, the soundtrack, which is also exclusive to Apple Music, he has not disappointed. The 16 years, honestly worth the wait. Those few tracks that he was releasing back in 2010, 2011, they weren't as great as they could have been. The track I Need a Doctor, the stuff he did with Snoop Dogg, he released a couple of tracks, they weren't that good. So I'm fine with waiting for him to put out his best possible work, especially for something that's considered the grand finale of his solo musical album career. And then on the last track, Talking to My Diary, is really all Dre at that point. He pretty much makes peace with Eazy-E. He talks about how he knows Eazy is looking from the sky down, looking from the clouds and the heavens, and he talks about just missing those memories, you know, of the days of N.W.A, and he's recounting those stories. This album is like a companion piece to the Straight Outta Compton movie, which is coming out next week. Perfect timing, just genius by Dre. This is the year of surprise albums. He delivered a hell of a surprise. Shout out to all the rappers and artists, Kendrick, Game, Cube, Snoop, all of those, you know, legends, Exhibit, who stepped up their game and delivered some of their best verses in years to really elevate this album to another level. Shout out to all the newcomers as well, the artists that aren't as known, the King Mez's, the Justices, the Anderson .Paaks, who flipped bars and changed up their flows and their styles and really stood toe-to-toe with the Doctor. And with that said, this album gets a solid 9 out of 10 for me. It's really worth it. It's really well worth the wait. Like, go check this album out. And I'll take it a step further. You really should buy this album because he's already announced that the proceeds of the album sales are going to go to building a performing arts center in Compton. It's a good cause. Now I understand you might not have bought an album recently, which I can't blame you for, but buy this one. The money is going towards a good cause and the album is incredible and it's worth it. Dre knows he doesn't need any more money, so why not take it and put it towards something productive to build a performing arts center in Compton, a place that can provide constructive things for inner city youth to do. And for that alone, you just gotta respect the man. Like, he's doing something nobody else is doing right now. Alright folks, that's all I got for my album review of Compton, a soundtrack by Dr. Dre. Like I said, go check it out. It's phenomenal. Follow me on social media, JRW the Creator, on Twitter and Instagram. Go to JordanRWilliams.com. You can also find a written review in correspondence with this video review. And then check me out on MoviePilot.com/JordanRWilliams. And I will catch y'all next time.